In today's 5-part video, I go motorcycle camping at the Lorraine Park Campground in Andover, Massachusetts. In it, I'll talk about why you should put it on your list to visit, how much it'll cost, what the amenities are like, things to do, and a bit of the history. In the other segments, I'll tell you about a free art museum and the national impact a local author had when living just down the street. All on this week's Campgrounds with the Yankee Camper, Harold Parker State Forest. It was early October as I headed out on what I figured was my last camping trip for the season. I decided I'd make it a little bit more of an adventure. The destination was a short distance, but a place I'd had on my list for quite a while. And this would work for something I hadn't done in over 10 years: camping from a motorcycle. It didn't take me too long to get to Lorraine Park Campground at Harold Parker State Forest. A quick check-in at the gate, and I was on my way to the campsite after a few comments about adjusting my load. The campground is located about 20 miles north of Boston. This is a great central location for visiting the historic sites of the city. As a matter of fact, the train station is about 10 minutes away, and in less than an hour, you're in the state capital. Boston is a walking city with a parking problem, so this is an easy way to get into the metropolis. But it's also close to various other cities and towns within an easy drive. In less than 45 minutes, you can be in Salem, famous for the witch trials, but was once the richest town in the nation with its Far East trade. Or Lexington and Concord, where the American Revolution began, but was also home to authors such as Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Louisa May Alcott. Or the National Historic Park in Lowell, which tells the story of the first planned industrial city during the American Industrial Revolution. Yep, at least two of America's revolutions started right here in Massachusetts. Oh, it can be claimed that the technology revolution began here as well. We had Samuel Morse, Alexander Graham Bell, and Ray Tomlinson, the inventor of email. Initially designated by the Boston Globe as a wasteland, the state began buying property in the Andover area for reforestation in 1914. The State Forest Commissioner continued to expand the acreage to the now 3,000-plus footprint of the forest. By 1916, the area was fully established, and the state felt it fitting to name the new forest for the man who had worked so hard to make it happen, Harold Parker. When the Civilian Conservation Corps was assigned to work in Andover around 1933, they built roads, dams, pavilions in this campground. After the CCC left in 1941, the campground was named to honor Harold Parker's daughter, who had continued the work in conservation her father had started. The speed limit is posted at 5 miles per hour, a little slow for the motorcycle, but the roads are wide and very well maintained. Each of the 91 available sites has a picnic table, fireplace, and standing grill. They're all relatively flat, and many are designated as tent only, but at least a third will accommodate an RV. There are 11 with electricity available. All the sites have a fresh water spigot. I counted 9 designated as accessible as defined by the ADA. Campsites can be booked in advance as far as 4 months, but the season runs from mid-May through mid-October, so none are available until at least the middle of January. If you live in Massachusetts, the cost is a very reasonable $17 a night. For out-of-state residents, the price jumps to $54 per night, which is in line with private campgrounds, but I think is a bit steep given the limited amenities, which I will cover in a moment. Pets are allowed, but they must be leashed, and no more than 4 per site, and have all their shots. Also note that alcohol is prohibited as well. Don't shoot the messenger. As I mentioned, there are a number of places that are less than 45 minutes drive away. But you're not in the middle of nowhere. Let me tell you what's less than 10 minutes away. At the campground, you're less than 5 miles from a premier specialist cultural experience. The Addison Museum of American Art houses a number of permanent exhibits, and it's located on the grounds of Phillips Academy in Andover. As the oldest incorporated academy in the United States, Phillips was founded in 1778. This prestigious institution has educated entertainment celebrities, famous sports icons, governors, presidents, and a king. It was even home to a famous author. This world-renowned school shared its campus for almost 100 years with another learned institution that was also the first in the nation, the Andover Seminary, which became the Andover Newton Theological School and is now combined with Yale University in Connecticut. This geographical cooperation will become clearer in the next segment. Considered a pioneer in education, Samuel Phillips Jr. is also a patriot, producing gunpowder in a mill along the Shawshene River for the Continental soldiers during the American Revolution. As the war continued, Phillips believed that the youth of the emerging nation would need a place of learning to be taught in the great end in real business of living. From the start, financial aid and scholarships were made available. The centerpiece of the campus was built in 1924 after the seminary left, and is named for the Academy's founder. The building overlooks the open green space, or in this case, the winter white space, known as the Great Quad. Directly across is the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, currently closed to the public for renovations, and the Phelps House, built in 1810. One of the campus's oldest and most elegant, the Phelps House is residence to the head of the academy. Across the street from the quadrangle on the south side, just shy of 160 feet, sits the Memorial Bell Tower. Built in 1923 as part of the campus revamp, this edifice memorializes the alumni who lost their lives in World War I. The surrounding grounds had been a military training field since prior to the War for American Independence, and George Washington reviewed troops there. The tower houses a 37-bell carillon, one of the largest in the United States. Diagonally across the quad, to the northwest, is the Addison Museum for American Art. Opening in 1931, the museum houses more than 29,000 objects in its collection. Admission is free. Nothing. Nada. Passing through the double doors, you enter a rotunda with a marble fountain adorned with a figure of a young Venus washing the ocean from her hair. Off the main entrance are 3 directions, each leading to separate galleries, some housing the permanent collection. There's also a second floor. Here was art currently focusing on landscape. The Florida Highwayman exhibits works by some 26 African American artists who plied their paintings along the East Coast roads of Route 1 and A1A in the Sunshine State, selling the pictures to survive. These were often painted quickly and sold for about $35 a piece, relying on their visual appeal to attract customers. At the opposite end of the floor is Captive Lands, a number of landscapes from around the country, including Niagara Falls. The basement houses a collection of ship models. Their exquisite detail helped to capture the intricacies of a bygone era in transportation, with the collection consisting of 24 creations commissioned by the museum's founder, Thomas Cochrane. I expect you'll see some of these appearing in future historical segments. The main floor has a total of 5 galleries. These display much of the permanent collection of the museum, including the work of Auguste Saint-Gaudens, Currier and Ives, and Edward Hopper, who will also be the subject of a future segment. As an additional gallery, the director's office had been converted to a small exhibit space to feature some of the work of John Singer Sargent. These are all part of Addison's permanent collection, including 4 paintings depicting very different subjects. A Spanish Romer dwelling depicts a cave living space still in use in the early 20th century. The Horses at Palma, 1908, was to show a lighter side of Sargent's ability while he was traveling in Spain. Val d'Aosta, A Man Fishing, features the artist's understanding of light and moves away from formal portraiture. Sargent's painting The Blue Bowl was just after the 1884 scandal of Madame X, which Sargent was dumbfounded to discover was thought scandalous. This domestic portrayal is much less formal than the large, often life-sized portraits for which he was known. Although born to American parents in Florence, Italy, and spending much time in Europe, John Singer Sargent considered Boston his home in America, and the Museum of Fine Arts has one of the most extensive collections of his work. Now, you know. But did you know one of the dormitories for Phillips Academy is the former home of a famous author who wrote 30 books, although only remembered for one? I'll talk about that in a moment, but first, let's talk about the amenities at the campground.
Thank you for watching, and I appreciate it. I don't receive any compensation for these videos, but I do this so that I can help share the information. If you enjoy what I do, buy me a cup of coffee. I'd really appreciate it. I'll put a link in the description below. Thanks.
My campsite was directly across from one of the 4 restroom buildings. Inside the men's room were 3 stalls and a urinal. There's also a counter with 3 sinks. Note all of the faucets are hand-free. Hand dryers are mounted on the wall at 2 different heights. There's also electrical outlets at either end of the counter for things like electric razors or recharging. There's 3 shower stalls, which were adequate, and the water was hot enough. Note there's no curtain, so the floor gets splashover, and hooks for hanging clothes are limited. These were located just after you enter the building. One is designated as ADA compliant, which gives a bit more room, plus a pull-down seat and the handheld shower head. The height is adjustable, but I don't see how a person confined to a wheelchair could make the adjustment if left up high. A 2-basin stainless steel sink is outside for dishwashing. This has both hot and cold running water, but requires squeezing the sprayer to get the water to flow. Although effective as a conservation concern, it limits the use of both hands during the washing and rinsing process. Located underneath is a handle for plugging the sink. Pulling up on the handle closes the flow. This will allow the sinks to be filled with soapy water and rinse water for dishes. I personally prefer to rinse the dishes with running water instead of a basin full of rinse water, but each to his own. Pushing down on the handle releases all of the water in the sink. Park rules require that you buy campfire wood at the park. This is located across from the ranger station in a small shed. The bundles are pre-packaged from a local source, and the cost is $7 per bundle, but it's credit card only. One bundle was sufficient for me per night, giving me enough left over to make a small fire in the morning. The dumpsters were located near the bathrooms. There's likewise a dump station for RVers near the park entrance. I'll continue with what's available for recreation in a moment, but first, let me tell you about one person's impact on the nation. The author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet, lived in Andover with her husband, Calvin Stowe, and family while he taught sacred literature at the Andover Theological Seminary from 1852 to 1864. The couple had met in Ohio through Calvin's work at the Lane Theological School, where Lyman Beecher, Harriet's father, was president. Eliza Stowe, Calvin's wife, and Harriet Beecher were very close friends. When Eliza died in a cholera epidemic in 1836, Calvin and Harriet consoled each other in their grief, which grew into a deepening bond and, eventually, marriage. It was during this time that Harriet experienced, firsthand, a slave auction in Kentucky. This was a disturbing experience for a young woman of 21 who had been raised in a religious family in Connecticut. This trip may have been prompted by her involvement as a devout young Christian woman in the Underground Railroad to see with her own eyes the treatment of those in human bondage. Her father, Reverend Beecher, was known to have strong anti-slavery sentiment and, like many devout Christians, was opposed to the institution. Harriet was an avowed abolitionist, and Calvin was firmly in the anti-slavery Republican Party. Her first book, The Mayflower, was published in 1843. It was a fictional collection of sketches highlighting the lives of Pilgrim descendants with humor and New England undertones, blending the culture and historical facts. This first endeavor did favorably well and laid the groundwork for future publications. The New England region is an area she would return to as a setting for later works. In early 1851, the Washington, D.C. publisher of a nationally read anti-slavery periodical, The National Era, offered the opportunity for Stowe to do some writing for the paper. Stowe thought she had a story that may last over a period of 3 to 4 publications. From the first week of June, 1851, through the beginning of April, 1852, Mrs. Stowe wrote a total of 41 weekly installments, missing only 3 weeks during the entire run. Wisely, Harriet retained the rights for the story to be put into book form. It was during this time that Calvin accepted a position at the Andover Theological School on the grounds of Phillips Academy. The family lived here for 12 years. Harriet used money from her book sales to improve the house, which had previously been a workshop and gymnasium. Using a current term, Uncle Tom's Cabin had gone viral. In it, Stowe exposed her readers to a plausible but disturbing faction of American life that many had put blinders on, allowing them to ignore a legal abomination. In many of the characters, those reading could associate personalities with people whom they knew in reality, allowing the story to take on a feeling of realism bordering on actual events. She also created one of history's most notorious and villainous antagonists ever to appear on the pages of a novel, that of Simon Legree. To this day, almost 175 years after its initial publication, he is still recollected as being pure evil, as much as any other horrendous person in history, real or imagined. It cannot be overstated how much of an impact this single book had on a nation that had kicked the can down the road on an issue that had plagued its very existence since inception some 80 years before. It stated that even President Abraham Lincoln, upon meeting Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1862, states, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that made this great war." Stowe went on to write more than 25 other works, including many with New England themes. But it was during her time living at the house that is now a dormitory for Phillips Academy students that she gained national attention and helped pave the way for a change that would shake the American people and restructure our very existence as a country. Now you know. So, what else does Harold Parker have to offer? Well, you can't visit her former home, except from the outside. You can pay your respects to Mr. and Mrs. Stowe at the cemetery nearby. Harriet passed away in 1896 and was laid to rest next to Calvin, who had died 10 years before. But if cemeteries aren't your thing, there's the opportunity for some hiking the many trails, or, as I did, get in a bit of fishing. Just be sure to get the appropriate fishing license. I had a little bit of success before the tip of my collapsible rod snapped, and I was pretty much done for the day. However, there's other recreational activities. The park has programs throughout the summer, and there's an amphitheater with a communal fire pit. Basketball hoops are near the designated rec area. There's both hoops for a one-on-one, as well as a full court for a pickup game. And, of course, a volleyball net. Horseshoe pits have been provided for adult entertainment, and there's rings available for those who may wish for something with a little less heft. Of course, for the children, there's a rather substantial jungle gym with the requisite climbing and sliding down appliances. There's also the ability to swing, both from your arms as well as in the traditional sense. For smaller children, there's a couple of bucket swings, and there's a bench or two so adults can relax and keep an eye on all the activity. In addition, built-in boards on the jungle gym help provide education about the surroundings. In addition to hiking and fishing, other recreational opportunities include mountain biking, canoeing, hunting, horseback riding, and picnicking. So what are you waiting for? Oh, yeah, you can't book it yet. If you found this video interesting, please take a moment and give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I put out a video just about every week on the places around New England I go, the camping gear that I use, and in my Making a Mess series, I show you how to use shelf-stable foods to make meals in your mess kit. So, until next time, I hope you'll get outside, and thank you for watching.